don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the videos here, please know that every single piece of content you watch is a true labor of love. Seriously, I pour my heart and soul into this channel. You see the final product, but you might not see the hours of research, the late nights spent editing, and the constant effort to learn new skills just to bring you the best possible videos. I strive hard to make sure the content is always high quality, insightful, and entertaining for you. It's a demanding process, but it's completely worth it to share this journey with you. If you appreciate that effort and want to help the channel grow, the single best thing you can do is hit that subscribe button. Subscribing is completely free, but it makes a massive difference to me. It tells me that the hard work is paying off and motivates me to push even further, create better videos, and keep this channel alive. So, if you want to be the first to catch the next video, if you want to support the grind, and if you want to be an active part of this community, please click the subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And give the video a like. Thanks so much for watching and for all your incredible support. I truly couldn't do this without you.
Look at the record. Just look at the cold, hard facts of the 1946 negotiations, the moment our future was set in stone. We are told today that partition was an inevitability, a tragic consequence of insurmountable religious hatred. But I say it was a political engineering disaster, a betrayal signed off on by our own leaders who mistook self-abnegation for statesmanship. We see the British and the League demanding parity. The Congress, with great fanfare, declares that it strongly opposes parity between caste Hindu and Muslim, arguing it would entrench communal divisions. A principled stand, you would think. But what did they accept in the end? They accepted a structure where the vast Hindu majority, the very foundational civilization of this land, was given a political weight near equal to a single minority group. They rejected the word parity, but they swallowed the concept whole, effectively liquidating the majority's voice by dissolving it into a generic Congress banner. Where is the Hindu representative on that list? Where is the political expression of our 80% population? There is none, while every other group, the Sikhs, the Christians, the Parsis, the scheduled castes, and crucially, the Muslims, stood with a distinct, recognized, and powerful seat at the table. The Hindu majority was politically rendered invisible and voiceless. This was not statesmanship. This was an act of civilizational self-sabotage, a political neutering of the majority before independence was even won. And the betrayal runs deeper. The Congress, in an effort to prove its secular bona fides, nominated Dr. Zakir Hussain, a nationalist Muslim. The Muslim League instantly wrote its objection, demanding sole representative status for all Muslims. And the Congress? They caved. They rejected the exclusion of their own key nominee, ceding the entire ideological high ground. They gave Jinnah the ultimate political weapon, the confirmation that Congress was merely a Hindu party and the League was the only voice of the Muslim community. They walked willingly into the trap, guaranteeing the very communal division they claimed to abhor. This entire interim government proposal was a direct violation of Prime Minister Attlee's own declaration that a minority cannot veto the independence of the majority. But by structuring the cabinet on this communal arithmetic, by dissolving the majority and elevating the minority to effective veto power, they made sure the veto was exercised. The Congress formally rejected 16th June proposal, and this rejection, this moment of principled defiance, ironically triggered Viceroy Wavell's guarantee to the League. This created the temporary caretaker government, which soon led to the League boycotted, Congress-dominated setup, guaranteeing the political deadlock that the British conveniently used to justify partition. This was not a failure of destiny. It was a failure of political nerve and strategy. It was the tragic choice to deny the majority a distinct political voice, reducing the vast Hindu population to mere bargaining cattle, to be traded in the final, malicious act of colonial engineering. We, the youth of today, recognize this treason. We refuse to let our civilization be politically dissolved again for the sake of a weak, historical secularism that only served to partition the nation. The lesson is clear. No representation, no voice. No distinct voice, no political power. That era of self-abnegation is over. We will not be voiceless again. Look at this date, 29th June, 1946. Just weeks after the cabinet mission presented its grand plan for an independent India, what do we get? Not the transfer of power, not the dawn of freedom, but an administration breakdown. The headlines scream, caretaker government installed. What does that mean? It means the viceroy, Wavell, puts a lock on the doors of the future. He dismisses all the political players and installs a temporary government of his own senior British officials. War, finance, home, all the essential portfolios of an independent nation are handed back to high-ranking British bureaucrats. And for what purpose? They claimed it was to prevent administrative collapse during the Congress League deadlock. A nice, tidy excuse. But we know the truth. This was the ultimate colonial power move, the final, humiliating demonstration that until the Indians played by the rules of communal parity and political self-liquidation, power would be kept firmly in British hands. This move was a betrayal on two fronts. First, it was a slap in the face to the Muslim League, who had been given a clear guarantee that if the Congress refused the interim plan, the League would be invited to form the government. Wavell blinked. Instead of installing the League, he installed the British bureaucracy. This wasn't about principle. It was about maintaining control. But the deeper, more tragic betrayal was against the entire nation. After years of fighting, after the sacrifices of generations, the Congress's rejection of the plan, however principled they thought they were being, only resulted in the British effectively saying, "You have failed the test. We are still in charge." This caretaker setup, a brief window of renewed, direct bureaucratic control, confirmed the total failure of negotiated power sharing. It was the moment the dream died, and the political nightmare began. It prolonged the impasse, allowing the divisions to harden. It was the waiting room for partition. The caretaker government paved the way for the eventual Congress-dominated interim government in September, which the League initially boycotted. That boycotted government, functioning under the shadow of the British, was designed to fail. It confirmed that the Congress, in their misplaced strategic moves, had created the very conditions for an administrative and political deadlock that made the final split seem inevitable. We, the youth of this nation, look back and see this sequence not as an unfortunate accident, but as a calculated series of events: the liquidation of the majority's voice, the breakdown of negotiations, the humiliating return to direct British rule, and finally, the forced, non-cooperative power sharing. The lesson is brutally clear. Political purity and strategic weakness lead only to prolonged impasse and ultimate dismemberment. We reject that inheritance. We will never again allow foreign powers or internal divisions to plunge our nation back into a political caretaker limbo. We demand strength, unity, and representation. That is the only way forward. We are always taught the grand political failures of 1946, the betrayals, the deadlocks, the slide to partition. But look closer. Look beneath the headlines of Viceroy Wavell's temporary caretaker government setup. Even in this humiliating moment of renewed British control, a profound truth about our civilization stands revealed. A truth that negates a century of colonial lies. Look at the structure they had to create, the ministries they needed just to keep the administration afloat. What did they establish? A dedicated ministry for home industries and supplies. Think about that. A supposedly backward, unindustrialized colony, according to the British narrative, a land whose people supposedly only knew farming and primitive barter, required a specialized ministry for home industries. This single administrative fact shreds the colonial myth that India lacked an indigenous, viable economy. The very necessity of this ministry is an undeniable proof of the prominence of small-scale, decentralized, and home industries, the very backbone of our economy dating back to ancient times. And this fact is a massive, historical vindication for the communities that built this economy, the Shudra communities. The colonial and subsequent leftist narratives painted them as excluded, uneducated, and relegated to the margins. But if the economy of India was so fundamentally based on decentralized production, requiring high skill, financial proficiency, and intricate supply chains at the grassroots level, then the communities running those systems must have been proficient, educated, and financially integral participants in the mainstream. The British, in their pragmatic effort to avoid administrative collapse, inadvertently confirmed the economic reality of a civilization they sought to dismantle. They confirmed that India's economic life was not based on massive centralized factories, but on the millions of skilled hands working in towns and villages, creating textiles, tools, crafts, and goods that fed the entire subcontinent. The existence of a ministry for home industries and supplies in the most temporary, bureaucratic of administrations is our historical evidence. It tells us that our economy was always complex, highly skilled, and distributed. It confirms the historical dignity, expertise, and central economic role of the Shudra communities. We reject the lies of exclusion. We reject the colonial narrative of economic backwardness. Our history is one of sophisticated, grassroots economic power. And by reclaiming this economic reality, we reclaim the true story of participation and proficiency for all those communities whose contributions were deliberately erased to fit a divisive political theory. The caretaker government failed politically, but administratively, it certified the strength and complexity of the ancient Indian economy. We build our future on that truth. We talk about the freedom struggle, but we need to talk about the fateful mandate that preceded it, the election for the Constituent Assembly in 1946. This wasn't just a political contest. It was the mechanism designed to draft the new constitution, the very bedrock of post-colonial India, implementing the cabinet mission's long-term plan. The process was indirect, yes, decided by the provincial assemblies, and it was structured on a communal basis, 3 neat categories: general, Muslim, and Sikh. The seeds of separation were already in the soil, planted by the British. Now, look at the numbers. The results are not just results. They are a tragic, polarized mirror reflecting a nation already fractured beyond repair. The Congress Party achieved a spectacular victory, securing 205 seats, a clear majority overall. They proved they were the dominant political force across the vast sweep of the country. But the real, devastating truth is right here, staring us in the face: the Muslim League's dominance. They captured 73 seats. That number itself is significant, but what it represents is apocalyptic. It was a near-total sweep of the Muslim reserved seats, 73 out of 78. This success mirrored their 94% success rate in the provincial Muslim constituencies earlier that year. What does this tell us? It tells us that despite the decades of work by nationalist Muslims, despite the Congress's claims of being an inclusive, non-communal umbrella for all, the political reality on the ground was stark. The vast majority of Muslim voters had politically declared the Muslim League their sole representative. They had chosen the path of separation, of Jinnah's two-nation theory, over the Congress's vision of a united India. This was not just a political win for the League. It was a devastating ideological blow to the very concept of a single, unified nation. The Constituent Assembly, the body meant to unite us under one law, was born with an internal, fundamental division: a victorious, majority Congress on one side, and an almost monolithic, powerful bloc dedicated to partition on the other. This polarized victory sealed the fate of the nation. It armed Jinnah with the undeniable mandate he needed to push for Pakistan. It showed that the fault line was not just political theory, but had become a deeply entrenched electoral reality. We must stop pretending this was an accident. The 1946 Constituent Assembly election was the final, public ratification of the two-nation theory by the very electorate the British had created. We, the present-day nationalist youth, study this history not to mourn, but to understand. We understand that in the face of such a monolithic, unified political threat, the Congress's strategy of self-abnegation and sacrificing the Hindu voice was a catastrophic failure. Unity must be built on clear vision, not on compromise with the principle of civilizational integrity. We will never again allow a constitutive body to be born with such a fatal, predetermined split. The lesson is etched in the map of partition. A polarized mandate leads to a divided nation. We work today to ensure the core mandate of this republic remains one and indivisible. Look at the political reality created by the 1946 Constituent Assembly elections. We often focus on the Congress victory, the unassailable control of 205 seats, giving them the numerical power and the bolstered claim of absolute sovereignty. But that's only half the story. The other half is the Muslim League's mandate. 73 seats, a near-total sweep of the Muslim reserved categories. They had an irrefutable mandate to represent Muslim India. They had maximum leverage, despite their numerical minority status in the final assembly. The result of this opposing, polarized strength? Zero compromise. Both sides had an absolute electoral basis for their claims. The Congress said, "We are the majority, we are sovereign." The League said, "We are the absolute voice of 100 million people, and we demand a separate state." The political deadlock wasn't accidental. It was cemented by the vote itself. And then came the moment of total collapse. A collapse of trust so complete it doomed the fragile settlement of the cabinet mission. The League had reluctantly agreed to the plan based on the compulsory grouping of provinces. But listen to what happened on 10th July, 1946. Pandit Nehru, the supposed visionary, publicly asserted that provinces were not bound to compulsory groupings. It was a fatal statement. With one careless, self-serving public claim of sovereignty, the Congress shattered the foundational trust that the League had placed in the agreement. They gave Jinnah the perfect excuse to walk away, to argue that the Congress had no intention of honoring the spirit of the plan. The League immediately rejected the entire proposal, declaring it null and void. The path to partition became a highway. We must face the blunt reality of the numbers. The Muslim League's 94% electoral capture in the Muslim seats. We cannot cling to the myth that the Muslims desired a unified India when their own elected representatives gave an overwhelming mandate for the party dedicated to separation. This vote was not an endorsement of unity. It was a stark, electoral rejection of the concept of a single, indivisible nation. The harsh conclusion for the present-day nationalist youth is this: our past leaders failed to read the mandate correctly. They failed to understand that when one side is playing for absolute division, a claim of absolute sovereignty on technicalities only guarantees the fight. The Constituent Assembly, meant to be the cradle of our constitution, became the graveyard of our unity, all because of two opposing, absolute mandates and one carelessly spoken statement that destroyed the last vestige of faith. We honor their sacrifice, but we learn from their failure. Today, our goal is clear. No more compromise on unity, no more self-destructive claims of technical sovereignty, only the resolute assertion of the nation's integrity. We will not repeat the failures of 1946. We are told that partition was inevitable, that the forces were too large, the hatreds too deep. But I reject that fatalism. I say partition was directly triggered by a single, avoidable act of political sabotage, a moment of utter strategic blindness from a man who should have been guarding the nation's unity. Look at the chronology of doom, 29th July, 1946. On this day, the Muslim League officially rescinded its conditional acceptance of the Cabinet Mission Plan. Why? Because the plan, with its provision for compulsory grouping of provinces, had been Jinnah's tactical basis for realizing Pakistan. He saw the groupings, where Muslim-majority provinces would first form regional units, as the stepping stone, a soft form of separation that could later be hardened into a state. Jinnah was looking for an excuse to walk away, a reason to cry, betrayal, and escalate. And who handed him that weapon on a silver platter? Pandit Nehru. Just weeks earlier, on 10th July, Nehru delivered his fatal statement. He publicly asserted that the provinces were not bound by the compulsory grouping provisions, declaring that the Constituent Assembly was sovereign and could change the plan as it saw fit. Think about the catastrophic impact of those few words. Jinnah and the League saw it immediately for what it was, a calculated betrayal. It proved their deepest suspicion, that the Congress planned to override the core grouping mechanisms the moment they gained power in the Constituent Assembly. Why would the League trust the plan when the incoming Prime Minister was already tearing up the foundational guarantee? The verdict of history is clear. Nehru's statement squashed the last, fragile chance for a united India. It was a profound misjudgment, prioritizing a technical claim of sovereignty over the life and unity of the nation. It gave Jinnah all the moral outrage he needed, validating his every claim of Congress duplicity and confirming his party as the only reliable protector of Muslim interests. The consequence was immediate, tragic, and bloody. This decision marked a decisive shift from negotiation to confrontation. It led directly, inexorably, to the call to arms, to Direct Action Day on 16th August, and the resulting massacres and constitutional crisis that made partition not just likely, but practically unavoidable. We, the youth of today, recognize that unity is not guaranteed by rhetoric. It is secured by strategic action and political integrity. When faced with a deeply polarized situation, the leader's job is to close the door on conflict, not throw it wide open with claims of sovereignty that destroy the basis of trust. The failure of 1946 was a failure of political nerve and strategic acumen at the highest level. We must learn from this ultimate blunder. When you offer a tactical gift to the forces of division, you pay for it in blood and broken borders. Never again. 16th August, 1946. Mark that date. It is not just a day in history. It is the day the knives came out. This was the moment the political game ended and the slaughter began. After months of negotiation, after the Congress's fatal sabotage of the Cabinet Mission Plan, Jinnah called for Direct Action Day. The League had formally rescinded its acceptance of the fragile unity plan. Their motive was brutally clear: to force the demand for Pakistan and to prove to the world that they were a power that could not be ignored by any means necessary. And what was the consequence of this political call? Communal carnage. The epicenter was Calcutta, tragically under a Muslim League-led government. On the first day alone, over 5,000 deaths. 5,000 lives extinguished in one 24-hour period, simply for being born into the wrong community. The horror didn't stop there. The violence exploded. From Calcutta, it raged through Noakhali, Bihar, Bombay, and the United Provinces, devastating communities, turning neighbors into murderers, and shattering the social fabric forever. This was not spontaneous riot. This was a calculated political mobilization of violence. It was the moment the Muslim League traded the conference table for the sword, leveraging mass murder to achieve a political end. And what did our leaders do? They were finally forced to confront the abyss. The political consequences were immediate. Partition became inevitable. Faced with the sheer scale of the bloodletting, seasoned leaders like Sardar Patel, who had once championed unity, finally and bitterly acknowledged the necessity of division. The sheer barbarity proved that the trust required for a united, peaceful government was gone. The political system collapsed entirely. The Congress-dominated interim government was installed on 2nd September, but the League, having drawn blood, initially boycotted it. They only joined later, on 26th October, but not to cooperate, to obstruct, sabotage, and solidify the total collapse of trust. They entered the government to destroy it from within. The lesson of 16th August, 1946, is the most painful one. When political negotiation fails, and when a faction is willing to leverage mass violence to achieve its aims, you cannot compromise with that force. The Direct Action Day was the full, ugly manifestation of the two-nation theory, proving that the demand for separation would be paid for in blood. We, the present-day nationalist youth, look back and see the cost of political softness. We see the price of strategic blindness. We honor those 5,000 souls who died in Calcutta, and we swear that we will never forget that the foundation of our republic was secured only after a terrible civil war, a war ignited by the very forces of division that our leaders failed to contain. The price of nationhood is eternal vigilance against those who would unleash violence for political gain. Never again will we let an administrative deadlock turn into a bloodbath. Never again. 16th August. Look at the history we just recounted. 16th August, 1946, Direct Action Day. The official line is that Jinnah's goal was merely political. To prove the League could not be sidelined. But we, the youth who demand the full, unvarnished truth, see something far darker. What kind of political action involves the premeditated slaughter of thousands? The systematic terrorization of communities across Calcutta, Noakhali, and Bihar? What you are looking at is not political protest. What you are looking at is the textbook definition of Islamic terrorist tactics, leveraging mass murder and communal carnage to achieve an absolute, non-negotiable political goal. If the entire process of achieving a state relies on the calculated use of violence against a civilian population, then what does that say about the foundation of that state? I put the stark conclusion before you. If Muhammad Ali Jinnah is the prominent, founding figure of a nation, and his primary political tactic was the mobilization of mass murder on Direct Action Day, then the nation which formed is, by its very inception, a nation founded on terror and nothing else. That is the dark, uncomfortable truth our history books refuse to state, but which the blood on the streets of Calcutta screamed. And look at the symbolism he chose. Jinnah called for black flags to be flown everywhere. We are told in our sanitized narratives that black flags are simply a universal symbol of protest, dissatisfaction, or resistance. But Direct Action Day was not about universal resistance. It was about an Islamic political agenda. That black flag, that AR riot as sword, it carries a profound, specific Islamic representation. This is not a neutral color. It is the black standard. It is the banner, reportedly, of the Prophet Muhammad himself, nicknamed Al-Uqubi, and symbolically adopted by the militant Abbasid Caliphate in their revolution to assert Sunni dominance. More chillingly, it is linked in Islamic eschatology to the final, apocalyptic arrival of the Mahdi. When Jinnah called for the flying of the black flag across the subcontinent on 16th August, he was not merely calling for a secular political protest. He was deliberately mobilizing the deepest, most potent symbols of Islamic jihad and conquest to signal that this was not a political disagreement, but a war of religious destiny. It was a call to arms dressed up as a constitutional protest. We, the nationalist youth of today, refuse to be naive about this history. We recognize that the violence was deliberate, the symbolism was potent, and the political goal was achieved through terror. Our strength today must be rooted in understanding this foundation. We must be eternally vigilant against those who use historical narratives to sanitize acts of mass violence. Our commitment to a strong, unified, and resilient India is our final answer to the politics of the black flag. We will not forget. We will not forgive. We must talk about Wavell's folly. The date is 26th October, 1946. After the carnage of Direct Action Day, after the blood of Calcutta, after the Congress had already formed the interim government, Viceroy Wavell believed he could fix the unfixable. He brokered a deal to get the Muslim League to join. His stated goal was noble: to encourage collaboration, to stabilize the administration, to somehow pull the nation back from the brink of total collapse. But Wavell was a fool to believe in goodwill. He was dealing with Jinnah's malice. Jinnah himself stayed outside the government. A tactical move. Instead, he installed his lieutenants, most notably Liaquat Ali Khan in the critical finance ministry. This was not an act of cooperation. It was the ultimate, insidious act of war by other means. The League's entry failed entirely to restore confidence. Why would it? The goal was not collaboration. The goal was deliberate paralysis. Liaquat Ali Khan, acting under direct orders from Jinnah, immediately used the power of the purse, the finance ministry, to malignantly obstruct every single initiative proposed by the Congress ministers. Did the Congress want to fund a scheme for agrarian reform? Liaquat vetoed it. Did they propose a plan for industrial development? Blocked. Did they need funds for an army project? Held up indefinitely. The finance ministry became a political weapon, a bureaucratic wall erected solely to choke the functions of government. The League's intent was not to govern, but to prove the impossibility of a united government functioning even for a single day. They didn't need to vote down Congress proposals. They just needed to starve them of money. This was a treacherous, calculated move to destroy unity from within. Wavell thought he was bringing stability. He actually invited the saboteur into the command room. The consequence was that in the last critical months before independence, India's own government was spending its entire time fighting itself, proving Jinnah's central thesis correct. Hindus and Muslims could not possibly work together. The final verdict on that moment must be harsh. The Congress and Wavell saw an olive branch. We see a dagger. The League's entry into the interim government was the final, decisive nail in the coffin of a united India. It was a masterclass in political malice, demonstrating that when an ideological adversary's primary goal is division, granting them power is an act of self-destruction. We will never be naive enough to invite the enemy into the treasury again. We learn from this treason. December 1946. Winter approaches, and the death rattle of a united India echoes from London. After the blood of Direct Action Day, after the treacherous paralysis inflicted by Liaquat Ali Khan in the interim government, the last, desperate act of mediation takes place. Nehru, Jinnah, and Wavell fly to London to meet with Prime Minister Attali and Cripps. The goal was simple, yet utterly futile. The British were attempting to revive the doomed cabinet mission plan. They wanted to put the pieces back together, to force the two sides back to the table and compel the acceptance of the compulsory grouping of provinces. But by December, it was already too late. The conference failed completely. Why? Because of inflexible arguments and positions so deeply entrenched that no amount of diplomacy, no threat of British withdrawal, could shift them. Jinnah knew the League had achieved its goal. The government was paralyzed, the country was burning, and the inevitability of division was now apparent to all. The League had won the leverage game through malice and violence. And Nehru? Even he, the great idealist who had sabotaged the plan with his claim of sovereignty back in July, was finally forced to admit defeat. He declared that he had stopped looking towards London. That single phrase is the epitaph for an entire era of politics. It signifies the death of external mediation. It was the final admission that the British could not, or would not, enforce unity. It meant that the fate of India was no longer in the hands of the colonial power. It was sealed by the unbridgeable chasm created by the League's uncompromising demand and the Congress's failure to strategically counter it. We, the nationalist youth of today, look at this moment and draw a sharp, necessary conclusion. You cannot reason with an uncompromising demand for separation, and you cannot rely on external mediators to save your unity. The time for negotiation was long past. The British failed to broker unity. The Congress failed to assert it. By the time the leaders left London that December, the argument was over. The only question remaining was how quickly the map would be drawn. Our lesson is profound. National unity is not a gift granted by mediators. It is a principle that must be fought for and enforced by strong, resolute leadership. That is the clarity we bring to the present. That is the resolve we draw from the failure of December 1946. Look at the absurdity. By December 1946, the Muslim League was sitting in the interim government, holding the critical ministries, actively paralyzing the administration from within, the very act we just dissected. Yet, simultaneously, they were boycotting the Constituent Assembly, the very body meant to write the Constitution for a united India. This wasn't a political disagreement. This was total, conscious, and absolute defiance. Their sole aim was no longer to govern or even negotiate, but to secure partition by any means necessary. They were using the government as a weapon to destroy the possibility of a united future. Naturally, the Congress was furious. They fiercely pressed Wavell to expel the League's ministers from the interim government. They demanded that Wavell enforce the rules, that he recognize the sabotage. But the British effort was too late and too feeble. Wavell, crippled by indecision and the complexity of the situation, did nothing. The League's reckless refusal to participate in the assembly only confirmed their treachery. And then, in the midst of this paralysis, we find the final, crucial act of resistance, a moment of clarity born from the recognition of existential threat. The date, 15th December, 1946. The man, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. The Cabinet Mission Plan's core was the compulsory grouping of provinces, the mechanism Jinnah saw as the basis for Pakistan. Assam was mandated to join Group C. The local leadership was confused, pressured, and exhausted. And what did Gandhi advise the Assam Congress leaders? He told them, unequivocally, to refuse to join Group C. He issued a stark, prophetic warning that cut through all the political compromise and legal technicalities. He warned that compliance meant Assam will be finished. He told them that joining the group meant Assam would lose its soul. This was the Mahatma, the ultimate champion of non-violence, calling for non-cooperation against a constitutional proposal. Why? Because he recognized the truth that our most cynical, power-hungry political leaders had missed. This was not about administrative grouping. It was about civilizational survival. It was an act of existential defiance, a realization that the legal path laid out by the British was, in reality, a death trap designed to deliver the province into the hands of the separatists. This moment proves that the path to division was not fully inevitable until the last minute, and that resistance, inflexible, soul-searching resistance, was possible. We, the nationalist youth of today, honor Gandhi's clarity in that moment. He saw the poison pill in the compulsory grouping and told his people to spit it out. The lesson is etched in fire. When the future of your civilization is at stake, you must prioritize its soul over the bureaucratic letter of the law. We must have the courage to stand firm, even against a constitutional mandate, when that mandate is designed to facilitate our destruction. We will not lose our soul for the sake of political expediency. Look at this forced marriage. Look at the sheer malice embedded in the Cabinet Mission Plan structure for the East. They mandated Group C, the Union of Bengal, a massive Muslim-majority province under the League's control, with Assam, a geographically distinct, Hindu-majority province with its own fierce cultural identity. This wasn't governance, this was political absorption. Assam's fear was not paranoia, it was existential logic. They knew they would be immediately subordinated to Bengal's overwhelming communal dynamics and the political machine of the Muslim League. The local Assamese leaders saw compulsory grouping as a direct, undeniable threat to their language, their culture, and their hard-won political identity. But the fear went deeper than political representation. The real, terrifying motive behind the League's push for this confederal arrangement was exposed here. Their goal was to use the administrative structure, the freedom of movement and resource control, to orchestrate large-scale Muslim migration and political penetration into the border regions of Assam. Their ultimate aim was to shatter the province's Hindu majority and seize absolute political control, making Assam an undeniable part of their future Pakistan. This wasn't about provincial cooperation. This was demographic warfare disguised as constitutional law. And this is why the great turning point was Gandhi's intervention in December 1946. He, the man who preached faith and unity, recognized the political treachery. He saw the grouping mechanism for what it was, a constitutional poison pill. He actively urged the Assamese Congress leaders to reject the Cabinet Mission's plan entirely, warning that joining Group C meant losing their soul. Why? Because Gandhi understood the fatal level of political distrust that had been established. He knew that compromise with the League on this point was not an act of unity, but an act of collective suicide for the Assamese people. His verdict was that to prevent League dominance and cultural erasure, the constitutional structure had to be broken. We, the nationalist youth of today, recognize that the battle for India's integrity is often fought on the cultural and demographic borders. We learn from Assam's struggle that political compromise must never come at the expense of a region's distinct cultural soul and demographic security. When the political structure is designed for your cultural annihilation, the only honorable and patriotic response is total, resolute non-cooperation and rejection. We stand with the courage of Assam, recognizing that the defense of our identity is non-negotiable.
Hit that subscribe button. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the videos here, please know that every single piece of content you watch is a true labor of love. Seriously, I pour my heart and soul into this channel. You see the final product, but you might not see the hours of research, the late nights spent editing, and the constant effort to learn new skills just to bring you the best possible videos. I strive hard to make sure the content is always high quality, insightful, and entertaining for you. It's a demanding process, but it's completely worth it to share this journey with you. If you appreciate that effort and want to help the channel grow, the single best thing you can do is hit that subscribe button. Subscribing is completely free, but it makes a massive difference to me. It tells me that the hard work is paying off and motivates me to push even further, create better videos, and keep this channel alive. So, if you want to be the first to catch the next video, if you want to support the grind, and if you want to be an active part of this community, please click the subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And give the video a like. Thanks so much for watching and for all your incredible support. I truly couldn't do this without you.